for Alimentarian Innovation Initiative at the Watson Institute for International and Public Affairs, Brown University. In his current role, he engaged with academics and practitioners to promote and conduct interdisciplinary research and training programs aimed at improving the effectiveness and accountability of disaster preparedness. He holds an MA in Sustainable International Development from the Heller School for Social Policy and Management at Brandeis University, and a BA in International Relations from Connecticut College. Through positions with the Colombian Ministry of Environment and Peace Corps Panama, his previous work experience has centered on participatory community development and natural resource management. His master's thesis examined the decentralization of natural resource management through a case study of Colombia's decentralized framework for marine and coastal conservation. So our first speaker is Mr. Seth Student.
So, hello everybody. You all should know me by now. And I get the wonderful challenge of getting you all after lunch. And even better than that, lunch and now you have Wi-Fi access. So, if you could please pay attention and try to keep me awake, then I'll do my best to try to keep you awake as well. So, it's really, it's a pleasure to be on this panel today. As environmental management is something that has been both central to my personal activities and studies over really the course of my entire life. So it's something very close to my heart. After being with you here for the last few days, I decided to shift the focus a little bit of my presentation. Initially I was going to speak more on the themes of decentralization, focused on my master's thesis and case study, but I decided to take a little bit more of a broad conceptual framework type approach in thinking about resilience. Okay, it's something that's the core of this program, and I think we could all value from a little bit of time thinking through kind of the conceptual frameworks of resilience and how to apply resilience thinking, right? And because the term resilience is used so often now, we hear it everywhere, right? We hear it in many different contexts. In different scenarios, but I think it's really important for the discussion to take some time to frame our thinking of resilience within kind of this understanding that we're all embedded within this social ecological framework, right, or a social ecological system, right? So I'm going to be talking a little bit more about systems level thinking. How many of you have heard about the term social ecological system? Raise your hand if you have, if that's a new term or if you've heard that term. Okay, so we got quite a few in here, which is good. And so what does this mean to you? What does this mean to you when you hear social ecological system? What are the first kind of thoughts in mind? You can just shout them out. I'm very persistent, by the way, so you're not going to get rid of me easy. Exactly. So society, environment as one, right? Is there anything else that comes to mind? Biodiversity, very important. What else? Social sustainable development without sacrificing the environment. Very good. Right. This is all right along the cues of what we're going to be talking about. That's right. I gotta go over here. There we go. So, exactly. Humans and nature is a social ecological system, right? Humans and nature are strongly interconnected to the point that they should be conceived as one social ecological system, right? The economy is embedded within society, which is embedded within the environment, right? So here's a diagram to show that these are actually the Sustainable Development Goals kind of corresponding to those levels. But it's really this idea of thinking that we are really embedded as society, the economy is embedded within society, and society is embedded within the biosphere or our Earth. And so no doubt you no doubt fully understand this concept, right? This isn't something new. But in today's, I'm really finding this more in kind of the more discussions I have and speaking with youth and others, the more we are operating in a globalized society, the fast-moving pace of our society, the urbanization, the technological advancements, we often need reminding that we're still living, right? We're still living in our biosphere. We're still living here on Earth, right? It's beautiful. It's a very beautiful and special place. And so my goal here with this brief presentation is to provide a frame or lens within which we can approach your thinking of disaster risk reduction and community-led initiatives within kind of this framework. I've left this presentation intentionally broad and overarching in hopes of touching upon some key elements that will stimulate a healthy discussion. So before I delve into the concepts of resilience and social ecological thinking systems, I first want to provide a brief overview of where I'm coming from, right? So I think it's very important whenever we're speaking with others that we first understand the worldviews of others and where they're coming from and experiences and how they got there, and let that kind of lead the discussions from there. We're in a very kind of polarized society across the world, and so I think that's a first stepping point. So I'm going to take you a brief history, not a long history of my life, but a brief kind of key snapshots of how I've become passionate about the environment and kind of this thinking that we need to re-energize ourselves or reconnect. So that is not me there, but it very well could have been. Okay, that is my son on the right-hand side. So from a very young age, I've had a deep connection to the northern forests of Vermont in the United States. Since the 90s, I've been managing a tract of land, forest land up there. And so it's really been an early entry point for myself to gain a hands-on understanding of the complex issues of nature and the complexity of nature and the many ecosystem services, right? The ecosystem services that are so valuable to our well-being. And ultimately the importance of viewing our natural world as something that we are embedded within, right? As I kind of mentioned before, we too often default to this false impression that our society is separate and disconnected from the environment. And that's often, unfortunately, reflected in our kind of government policies and often our behavior. So we really need that reconnection. So, however, in our globalized society, there are virtually no ecosystems, right, that are not shaped by people, and there are no people that are without the need of ecosystem services. So, the forest management work that I do back in my home state has also taught me a valuable lesson about resilience and how, through the implementation of carefully managed practices, a forest can become actually more resilient and healthy. Right? So through this interaction of how we manage the forest and how we work with it, it can actually become more resilient. And so that's why I have a picture up there of my son, because I think it's important that we energize and reconnect to our youth, because this is the world that they're going to be living in. And so I try to do my best to make sure that he's as connected as I was and will continue to be. He's also pretty cute too, I think. So I mentioned ecosystem services, right? Ecosystem services are the benefits people obtain from ecosystems. So what are some examples? Can you all give me some examples? Have you heard the term ecosystem services? Right? So what are some examples of ecosystem services? Shout them out again. Nutrient cycle, okay? Very good. Provisionary services, which mean what? Right, so the direct services that nature provides society, you have the provisioning services. Any other ideas? Any other, yep?
Regulating services.
Regulating services, can you provide an example of a regulating service?
For example, regulating floods.
Yep, mitigating floods, so drain off. And any others? Cultural, very good. We touched on the key three. So they also provide cultural and spiritual connections, right? It's very important as well. So here it's not rendering great, but yeah, we have our provisioning, regulating, and cultural. Very good job. And so there you see, the direct services that ecosystems provide us are wood, food, medicines, as it was touched on. Some of the regulating services, the water filtration, waste decomposition, the pollination, and then the cultural, right? The spiritual, the personal growth, which I think is still very much important for us as we need to appreciate these more. So this is kind of an overview here, kind of continuing on in where I'm coming from. From 2008 to 2012, I worked in the country of Panama as an environmental health extensionist. Right? This became another core experience of mine that has shaped the way in which I view society's place within the natural world. The work I was doing focused on water and sanitation and hygiene, so wash activities that Adam touched on a lot, and ranged from also participatory community development and education and organizing, and also the construction of water delivery systems, of constructing rural gravity-fed aqueduct systems, and sanitation infrastructure, building latrines. All this kind of in the larger umbrella of conserving our potable water sources there. And so what did this teach me, right? Conducting this work in this rural, economically really impoverished communities, but very rich in natural resources, really opened my eyes to the inseparable linkages between natural resource management and sustainable development. Right? How pervasive problems of poverty and inequality are so intricately linked to the natural resource management decisions that are made at the local level, the community level, the regional level, and national level, right? We can't separate the three, they're all permeating each other. Following my work in Panama, I went on not too far, a little bit further south to Colombia. And I got a very different perspective from a community type level. I was working in the Colombia Ministry of Environment, conducting research on the decentralization of natural resource management within this lens of Colombia's coastal and marine coastal conservation. This picture here is one of the sites that the Ministry of Environment was working in. Just what do you see? What comes to mind when you see this picture? All right, walking. Houses on stilts. Yep. Vulnerability, very much so. Any other thoughts that come to mind? A poor community, impoverished. Exactly, and these are all key points, right? I won't get too much into this, but there's actually an interesting case study of a community that's on a coastal lagoon that was trying to implement a coastal mangrove reforestation project. And interestingly enough, so the Ministry of Environment was supporting this project through the local, they have a very decentralized system in Colombia. And so the local environmental authorities were taking the lead on it, supported by the ministry. However, what's really kind of noteworthy on this is the institutional powers at play that the Ministry of Environment had to operate within at the national level, right? They're not operating independently, they're having to operate within the larger framework of the country's legal framework and power structure. So while the ministry was moving forward with this reforestation project of mangroves, simultaneously there was a new port being put in through the oversight of the ports, and they were basically taking out the mangroves that they were replanting, right? And so you have this competing interest at play, competing power dynamics. So working at the ministry level, right, kind of that policy top level, can be valuable policy-oriented perspectives and understanding how institutional power dynamics inevitably create winners and they create losers in regard to the benefits received from natural resource conservation. Since many people's livelihoods depend directly on access to and use of natural resources, the institutional arrangements that determine who makes decisions, who controls availability, who has access, and who benefits from the management structure of natural resources, really in any given area, have far-reaching implications on equality, empowerment, wealth distribution, and ultimately the larger picture of environmental sustainability. Right? Everything is interconnected. Environmental policy decisions being made in offices in faraway cities and the capital cities have direct impacts on communities. So overall, these experiences have not only shaped my understanding of natural resource management, but have unveiled the importance of needing to apply kind of this systems level thinking approach when really addressing these complex issues, right? And this is all very much linked to disaster risk reduction, right? Environmental sustainability, the health of our ecosystems. So I want you to kind of think and apply these terms and this way of thinking when you're thinking about either your individual projects that you're working in groups, but also kind of as we go through the other discussions on more disaster-related topics. And so I want to go a little bit now into the thinking of resilience as a socially ecological term, right? So resilience kind of framed within this understanding of social ecological systems. You know, I know you've heard various definitions and framings of resilience over the past few days, right? But I'm going to give you another one, okay, just to add to the mix and really just add to kind of your cool toolkit. And I think this is kind of more of a broader, encompassing definition of resilience, right? So resilience is the capacity of a system, be it an individual. There's resilient individuals. Our bodies are resilient. A forest, a city, or an economy, really to deal any type of system, to deal with a change and continue to develop, right? It's about how humans and nature can use shocks and disturbances, like a financial crisis or a climate change, to spur renewal and innovative thinking, right? What I like about this definition specifically is that it takes a systems level view, right? But it also touches upon renewal. And I think that's key. I think that's a really important concept. I like the idea that resilient systems can emerge from a disturbance and be even stronger afterwards, right? I think that's a crucial point. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of what resilience thinking is founded upon. There are really kind of three essential pillars within this framework of a socially ecological system. And we talked about the first one, right? Complex interdependencies between people and ecosystems. That's really kind of the crux of this idea of that society, economy are all embedded within nature, right? In spite of the immense technological development and progress that we've made, our economies and societies are still fundamentally dependent upon the ecosystems to provide us with a hospitable climate, clean water, food, the fibers for making clothing, baskets, whatnot, and numerous other goods and services, right? So we're still highly, although it may seem like we can operate without natural resources, we're still highly dependent upon them, right? Our larger atmosphere. So that's kind of the key first point. The second is that really human development has pushed our planet very dangerously close to its boundaries. I don't know if however many of you are familiar with the planetary boundaries. I know one of you was, I was talking with you earlier, I'm not sure where you are, but the planetary boundaries concept and the diagram of showing our planetary boundaries and how close we are to exceeding some of these thresholds. But over the past few centuries, we've experienced an acceleration, really a great acceleration of human development, right? Particularly following World War II, We've kind of entered this phase of great acceleration where you see the curves going way up of how much of population growth and how in urbanization and how much we're changing our natural environment. So much so that scientists are now arguing that we've entered a new geological era, right, called the Anthropocene. Moving on from the Holocene and now entering the Anthropocene, where humanity is really influencing every corner and every aspect of Earth. All right? So that's the second foundation here. The third, which I find very interesting to think about, and kind of goes into that concept of thinking about resilience and renewal following that, is this technology paradox, right? What got us into this situation, as far as our environmental degradation, our land use changes, and all the issues that we're facing right now, climate change, is really our innovative thinking as humans and kind of the technological developments that we've made over the centuries, right? But that's the paradox here, is that it's that type of innovative thinking and technology development that's going to get us out of this as well. So we also need to take these innovative strategies and think about ways in which we can apply them to improving our management of natural resources and the way we approach our thinking. So I want to talk a little bit about how we kind of have this conceptual framework of resilience and the foundations of what we're building upon, actually applying it, right? So it's one thing to understand the multidimensional layers of resilience, and then it's another to know how to apply that thinking, right? So now that we have this understanding, okay, so now what do we do with it, right? So a resilience thinking approach really kind of investigates how these interacting systems of people and nature can best be managed in the face of disturbances, and surprises, and uncertainties and shocks, right? So it's kind of, and we're going to wrap this up here. I'm going to go through these, and because I want to have ample time for discussion and hearing your thoughts as well, because I think that's very important. But kind of on an ending note, I want to highlight 5 key principles for building resilience. Right? There's certainly more than these 5, but I think these 5 are kind of our crucial building blocks for a resilient system. When I have 5 minutes, I thought it was going to be brief, but I guess I ramble on. And so the first one is that maintaining diversity and redundancy is key, right? So we need to have high biodiversity in order for a resilient system to work, right? Systems with many different components, and that could be species, it could be actors, it could be sources of knowledge, or thinking broadly, are generally more resilient than systems with few components, right? Example of this would be, a monoculture crop of all corn is very much less resilient than a permaculture of many different crops intercrop with each other. So if a pest or a plague hits, that monoculture is going to be all wiped out. Or if you have a system of permaculture, it's going to be able to provide that food and that food security throughout. So that's just an example, and many others, of how diversity actually strengthens resilience. And another concept here is the redundancy, right? I want you to think of redundancy as providing insurance, right? Insurance within a system by allowing some components to compensate for the loss and failures of others. One example is having different sources of water, right? So say you usually get water from a well and that well breaks. What's your redundant system going to be? Where are you going to get water when that happens, right? So maybe you have a rainwater catchment system as a backup. What are your backups, right? Your power goes out, you have a generator, right? Those types of things. And so think of it as kind of providing insurance that your system's going to keep going. Moving to the second point is, and this is key too, is managing connectivity, right? And keyword here is manage, right? We don't want to necessarily increase or decrease connectivity, it's manage, because connectivity refers to the structure and strength with which resources, these could be species, actors, they disperse, migrate, and interact among patches, habitats, and social domains in this social ecological system. And so I say manage because connectivity can be both a good thing and it can also be a bad thing, right? And so high levels of connectivity can facilitate recovery after a disturbance, but highly connected systems can also spread disturbances faster. So an example of kind of a good connectivity is restoring wildlife corridors that may have been fractured by a road. And so finding ways in which wildlife can transverse and go into either other habitats or their habitat that's been broken up. So that's an example of kind of restoring connectivity or good connectivity. Kind of an example of bad connectivity may be an overly connected system. May reduce the probability of population survival when all populations are affected by at the same time of disturbance. Right? So a highly connected society that might be affected by a fire, they're all going to be affected. That's too much connectivity, or disease as well. So going on, that's managing connectivity. Those two are key. The third one, managing feedbacks and slow processes. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but feedbacks are kind of the two-way connectors. How many of you have heard about feedbacks in kind of systems thinking and social ecological things? Okay, a few. This is really kind of the key to it all. And so feedbacks are two-way. Feedbacks are two-way connectors between variables that can either reinforce or dampen, right? So there's positive feedbacks and negative feedbacks. Kind of just I want to give you one example of feedback because sometimes it's a little bit hard to think about. And so an example of reinforcing feedback is introduce grass in this grassland that can cause fires, which then promotes further growth of grasses, right? So you have this grassland that's introduced into this ecosystem. That causes fires, and those fires actually increase the grasses. They feed off of those fires, right? So that's a reinforcing feedback loop. Going on now to encouraging learning is another key aspect of this. Resilience is all about dealing with change and adapting, transforming in response to change, right? Because social ecological systems are always in development, there's a constant need to revise and exist knowledge to be able to undertake adaptive management. So it's really kind of this concept of being adaptive and applying adaptive management. Finally, in my last 30 seconds, is broad participation. And this is something that I'll be happy to speak with you more later, and kind of the need for it and how we can think about the devolution of power in actual real power terms and coming down to at the community level. But overall participation through active engagement of all relevant stakeholders is considered really fundamental, right, to building social ecological resilience. It helps build the trust and relationships needed to improve legitimacy and knowledge and authority during decision-making processes. And as you all know, there are varying degrees of participation, right? It could just be informing a stakeholder, and that could be called participatory, right? Or it could be actually what I talked about earlier, the full devolution of power, right? And that's really the key, is that it's active participation and not just in a frame. So what is crucial is that participation is undertaken thoughtfully and in a way that empowers those that depend directly on the use of natural resources for their livelihoods. Thank you very much, and I'll leave you with that photo. It's a photo of a beaver dam. You can ask me later. Beavers are amazing animals, and I would really just want to talk about beavers. So, all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Seth. Our second speaker is a professor of community development.